it's not about the failures. It's more, just what you learn, in the process and just, moving forward and just figuring it out. That's one of the things that's great about real estate is there's so much opportunity to collaborate and work with other people and just move the needle forward. So.
Welcome to Your Real Talk, the podcast where you get to let your guard down and talk about what's real for you. I'm your host, Luna Petty. I'm an entrepreneur and a California real estate and mortgage broker. On this podcast, we hope to bring you real insights and advice from real estate experts so that whether you're a buyer, seller, or just interested in the real estate industry, you walk away with tips to help you navigate the real estate market. Now, I'm here to welcome my guest, Josh Barr. Josh is a young, dynamic real estate entrepreneur who's passionate about helping his community. He's also growing his real estate business in the Orange County area, although he's originally from Ohio. While he serves his community by providing solutions to homeowners, he also does that by collaborating with investors and real estate agents. Josh, welcome to Your Real Talk, and thanks for coming along.
Luna, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I've known you for a little bit, but I don't know as much about you that I would like to know. So besides knowing that you're from Ohio, you're now living in Orange County, tell me what you do as far as wholesaling and how you got to this point.
Yeah. So that's a great segment into our conversation and what I focus on. So yeah, you said it. I focus on real estate wholesaling. I started real estate wholesaling back in 22. So the end of 22, the November of 22 is when I first started real estate wholesaling. And just to kind of break down, what wholesaling is. So basically, real estate wholesaling is an exit strategy for investors. So look at it like unlike, investors that are doing like buy and hold rentals or, fix and flip, which are more of, longer term strategies for real estate investors. Those usually both take, time to do. Wholesale is a short term strategy. So typically with, wholesale, you get in and out of a real estate deal, fairly quickly. Sometimes it can even be a same day, transaction. So, essentially wholesale is, you get a contract to purchase a property from a seller. Typically those sellers are motivated, they need to sell the property due to some kind of stress. Whether that's a financial distress or, the property is just in disrepair. The sellers really want to alleviate the burden that, that property is causing them. And typically what, these sellers are willing to do is sell the property and as is condition to an investor, which basically means, like I said, they don't want to do any repairs. They don't want to do anything to the property. They just essentially want to be done with it and move on, from the property. So as a wholesaler, I get these types of properties, with these sellers under contract and, essentially you get the contract and the piece of paper, will say that, the seller agrees to this price. And as a buyer, we agreed to buy it at that price.
Mm-hmm.
And that contract that you have is an opportunity, the opportunity to purchase the property, that it in itself, can be an asset, which is, what wholesaling essentially is. We take that property that, we have under contract. And at that point, we're able to present that opportunity to, investors that are looking to fix and flip or to buy and hold. And essentially we're able to, transfer that asset, that contract to another investor, for an opportunity cost for that investor to take over that property and do like a fix and flip, or if they're looking to hold the property. So definitely as a wholesaler, I am interacting with, sellers, investors, agents, definitely finding solutions and working with, all parties to come with a win-win, scenario for everyone, which is great. I love it.
So tell me, what do you think are some of the advantages as to why investors will go to a wholesaler versus a traditional real estate transaction?
Right. So for me, in my, personal experience, I found that, a lot of investors, especially fix and flip investors, they really don't like, the work of looking for the deals all that much. I know, they're mainly focused on, the projects, the renovations, managing contractors. They're not, spending, hours or hours, every day looking for these opportunities, whether that be going to real estate agents, going directly to motivated sellers. These investors are mainly just focused on the projects that they're working on, and then they love to work with wholesalers because you know we're the ones that are in the trenches, making calls every day, building those relationships with agents, with sellers to bring really really good opportunities to investors where they can just look at the deal, make their decision, and then they're able to step right into a new project.
Makes sense. Yeah. It takes time to go and hunt for all those properties. So to have that middleman that's kind of doing that hunting for you is helpful. But what are
Definitely.
some of the disadvantages then, if you see any disadvantages to working with a wholesaler if you're an investor?
um Disadvantages from an investor, yeah, there can be, depending on, the wholesaler that the investor is working with. Some properties can, unfortunately be, the margins can be too tight, especially if the wholesalers are, asking for too much of a fee, or wanting too much for the property, then obviously that won't make sense for the investor, to move forward on it themselves, where especially if it's like a property that's on the market, if a wholesaler brings an investor a property that's on the market, some investors will be like, oh man, I could have offered on that deal myself, but at the end of the day they didn't. So sometimes if it still is a really good deal, and the numbers pencil, I mean, some investors are definitely willing and happy to pay wholesalers money for these opportunities, especially if it's a really good one.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any advantages, disadvantages for the sellers that you work with? I mean, advantage, it sounds like they get to offload their property without doing maybe the deferred maintenance or what have you, or if they're
Yeah.
in a pre-foreclosure situation. So other than those kind of obvious ones, what maybe advantages or disadvantages for a seller who's thinking like, oh, well, maybe I should go to a wholesaler instead of a traditional real estate agent?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually just was speaking with an agent a couple days ago, and I'm actually, this is a real deal I'm working on now, is a off market property, that is in South LA. So this is an opportunity that was brought to me off market, so no one has seen it. This was brought
Mhm.
to me from an agent. And we actually had this conversation. We were talking, and I was asking about his seller, what their motivation was, and in this instance, it was some health issues. So the owner has Alzheimer's, actually, unfortunately, and his two adult children are taking care of him now, and they just need to sell his property and just move on to this next chapter of their life. And I had the conversation with the agent, and I was asking him what he tells sellers, because with what I'm doing, I'm more working with real estate agents. So I'm not talking with the actual homeowners all that often. I am every now and then doing
Mhm.
some direct to actual seller outreach, but mainly I'm working with real estate agents who bring me these great opportunities. So I was asking him, what what is the reason they're wanting to sell off market? Are they looking, to just get out, or what's going on? Because I told him, I was like, if they list this property, they'll probably be able to get more, because it is the MLS is the largest buyer database, out there. That's where you get the most eyes on the property. That's where, everyone sees it. And
Yeah.
he's like, I know that. He's like, I explained that to my seller. We have this option. We can list the property on the market. We can have, open houses. We can have showings. We can have, a bunch of offers that we can, look through and make a decision on. But he also explained, what comes with that is, a lot more time. It can take, a longer process. There's some more, headache involved in terms of, showings, people going in and out of the property. A lot of, times, there's financing involved, whether that's, conventional financing or hard money loan financing, where there's like appraisals involved. And he explained all of that. And they were just like, no, we don't want to do that. We just want to sell the property. We just want, no repairs, no nothing, just quick
Yeah.
close, cash. And at that point, he was like, all right, I have an investor that, I worked with on a deal previously. We just closed a deal with this agent last month. And then, a couple weeks later, he brought me this great opportunity. So he's able to show his seller that, hey, look, like, here's a solution that I have, for your problem. Here is an investor that, I just closed a deal with, who's a reliable investor, who will be able to purchase this property, as is condition. And, I went out there and saw the property, and now we're moving forward on it. So we're providing a solution, for these sellers that are, going through a pretty tough time. So we're in a good position to help them out and move forward.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So I've always, maybe it's because I'm on the real estate side, but I've always looked at wholesalers as like a helping hand, as my positive buddy. And it's going to help a seller that needs to offload a property, quickly, similar to that situation. But what I didn't know recently, somebody told me, is that wholesalers can have a bad reputation of taking properties. Are you aware of that, and like why that is, where that came from? Why is that myth out there that, wholesalers can be a bad guy?
Yeah, no, I have heard that, definitely.
Okay.
That is definitely kind of a cloud that kind of, hangs over wholesaling and the industry. I think, my opinion on that is, there's good and bad people in every industry. With wholesaling in particular, one of the great things about wholesaling is the barrier to entry is very, very low. A lot of times for wholesaling, you don't need a lot of money. You don't need, a lot of, capital to start doing, a lot of, I know wholesalers that, aren't licensed. I myself am licensed. So you don't even need a real estate license in California to do wholesale. So the barrier to entry is very low. So that can attract, a certain kind of people that, just want to lock up contracts. That's something that unfortunately, can happen in the industry is, people will, just get properties under contract, just, to see if it could sell, if they could find, an end investor for it. But at the end of the day, the numbers are, just too high, and it was a whole waste of time,
Mhm,
doing that.
mhm, mhm.
So that is what I hear, especially talking to agents every day. I talk about wholesaling, I talk about investing, and a lot of agents that I talk to, they hear that word, and you can tell, they just cringe up. And that's something that I would like to hopefully at least spark a change. At least what I can do on my part is just to be as ethical and respectful and just collaborative. And I think if you go about the business and that respect, then it's gonna people are gonna want to work with you, and they'll look at it as in a different light than just
Mhm.
a past, perception of what, they heard or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I can see that because it's the same, right? In real estate and loans, there are a lot of people that are just salespeople. They're about getting any house,
Yep.
they're convincing people why a house that's not for them is for them. And,
Right.
they get this bad reputation for real estate agents and people think, oh, well, all real estate agents are salespeople and you're going to try to force me into a house that I don't like. And I'm like, I'm not that. I only want you to, if you love a house, I want you to buy it. Or if this loan works for your budget, I'm not about stretching people's budgets and whatnot. So yeah, I get it. There's a lot of that in my industry that I have to show people the other side. Like, hey, I'm not them. I'm
Yeah.
something else, and I'm ethical, and I'm about you, the client. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like to say, like, on the wholesale side, like, we're like deal finders, not deal creators. Like, you can't convince a seller to sell, at a low price if the motivation, is not there. If you just can't do that. You can't back someone into, a corner to sell a property, which I think, some people try to go, that route when they're talking with
Yeah,
sellers. They're very, brash, and they're very, you know, just hard on them. And a lot of the time,
aggressive and yeah,
it sucks because a lot of the times, the people that they're reaching out to are going through, some sort of distress, in their life, whether it's, personal, or whether, something is wrong with the property. They're usually, in a rougher, part of life, and they're ready to move on to the next chapter. So that's,
yeah.
definitely, though, the wholesalers that are, willing and wanting to help these people. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, I think the more people, that you can help and collaborate with, that's only going to propel, you forward and enable you to do more. So I think that's a big component of it.
Absolutely. We need more ethical wholesalers.
Yes.
So, what is your criteria? Like, I can see how a lot of people could want to sell their house using the wholesaling method. It's faster, it means less work,
Yep.
usually for a seller, but you guys don't want every house. So, what's that criteria look like for you?
Yeah. So in terms of what, we're looking for, I like to talk to investors. Honestly, I kind of I kind of do like a reverse engineering. So I'll talk to investors in the market, in different pockets of where I'm looking, and see what they're looking for. Because at the end of the day, we're serving the sellers and we're serving, the investors. We're bringing these great opportunities. So I mean, that's going to tell me right there exactly what I want to look for, is just going straight to, the source, and asking, questions, what kind of properties are you looking for? Are you looking for, because some investors just like 3 bedrooms, so I'm not necessarily looking for a lot of like 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. So there
Yeah.
are, certain, things like that. You just want to really dive into, the market. And, I say the market, but it's crazy. Like like Los Angeles is like 100 different markets, or 1,000. Right? Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like one city is this, and then the next city is this. And so you really gotta tune in on the individual, pockets, and see what investors are buying. And you can do that, on, like, I have my license, so I use the MLS a lot. So I look on the MLS to see, flip properties. I see what the investors are doing when they bought it, how much they paid, what they bought, what they did to it. So that really gives me a good idea to, when I'm looking for the next opportunity. All right, I know what my clients are looking for, so I can kind of cater what I'm looking for, so I can bring those good opportunities to the table.
Got you. So then on the flip side, how do you vet your investors? How do you know who's serious or who's just going to string you along?
Yeah, so that's a work in progress. I am learning every day.
Yeah.
Just the more, I think it's the more investors you talk to and the more conversations that you have, the more, you learn, and the more you can kind of, because there are some people that, aren't just tire kickers, I like to say, people that maybe are
Yes.
serious about investing, or, sometimes it will just be like another wholesaler. It's not actually someone who's going to flip the property. It's someone who's going to try to sell it to their investor. Um, so yeah, that's something I definitely, do. I like to find an investor and give them a call. I usually, just cold call investors. I believe I cold called you actually. So it worked out in that regard. But yeah, just cold call and have conversations. I like to ask a lot of questions. How many projects have you done? What areas do you like? How have you been doing this for a while? Just ask a lot of questions to see what they're looking for you, because not all investors are the same. Some investors are just looking for a couple fix and flips a year. Some people are
Yeah.
doing 5 fix and flips a month, so their margins, they don't need to be as big as someone who's just doing a couple a year. So, and then some investors do buy and hold or development. So when we have those opportunities, which we do come across from time to time, I'll have those people in my back pocket as well. But yeah, definitely vetting investors, and I think just staying consistent and following up with investors that you're working with is something that's very important. I think maintaining a good relationship is something that goes a long way, because at the end of the day, you're on the investor side. It's people want to work with people. At the end of the day, you want to work
Yeah.
with someone that you like to do business with, you trust, and some of that can take time. So it's all about building that relationship, and just providing as much value as you can to keep the relationship going for years to come, and hopefully you can do a lot of deals together.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yes.
So let's say, so you have a property. How do you assign, or what is the process in a loose? Because I know it's probably more detailed than we can really get into the weeds. But
Yeah.
how do you really assign a price with the seller that you're going to purchase it, and then figure out what you're going to let it go for the investor? How does that
Right.
process in between look?
Yeah. So as a wholesaler, you kind of want to look at the end in mind first, so to speak. So what I do for every property before I, will offer, a price to buy the home from the seller, I like to look at that property and its potential. So that's what it's all about, as investors. You're looking for the potential. What could this property be, especially with, a property that may be, let's say, like its original condition, it's, grandma's house, carpet in the bathrooms, all that good stuff. So you want to look at, those types of properties and see, what could this property potentially sell for in this neighborhood once it's, done to the nines, once it's, beautiful, once it's, today's standards, new plumbing, new electrical, new everything. You want to
Mhm.
see what those properties are selling for. And it is subjective. It's not a science. It's an art. Everybody has their opinions, but you look at the numbers. Essentially, you look at what the properties are selling for that are comparable. So you like to stay within like three bedroom, within 250 square feet. You don't really want to go over that. Um, but you look at the end in mind. So you look at what this property may sell for on, the back end. You calculate, how much repairs it's going to take to get from where it's at now to where it's going to be. And then, you can add in, what a typical investor would look for in terms of an ROI, on the back end, whether that's, 10%, or whether that's, 15%, depending on different markets. And then you can typically, plug in or fit in a wholesale fee, an opportunity fee, I like to say, is because you're providing this opportunity, to an investor. They're willing to pay that price in order to get that opportunity and to hopefully, really maximize on the back end of it.
Mm,
So you look at the end in mind, and then obviously the number, when it comes down to what you offer the seller, I mean, it has to make sense. I know a lot of, people think of investors and they're just like, oh, low ball, people just, which, sometimes that's how it goes. You do have
yeah.
to offer low on some of these properties just because they're, really dilapidated, or just, the property values are not as high in the area. So it just has to make sense for everybody. And, sometimes there's some back and forth. Sometimes, the price is right. It's what the seller wants. That's the number they want, and it works out perfect. So every deal is different. Every property, every transaction is different. But that's what I've seen in terms of, coming to that, offer on the front end is, kind of starting with the end in mind first.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So let me ask you, have you noticed any, I know real estate rates have affected the market in different ways.
Yeah.
Are there anything, is there anything that affects your strategies in terms of wholesaling, whether it's the rates or whether it's a buyer's market, seller's market? Like what really goes into affecting a wholesaler strategies?
Yeah. So I would say, I mean, I've been in the business for almost 2 years, so I have a smaller, kind of view on the market. And I'm not originally from, California, as you mentioned earlier. I'm from Ohio, so definitely I'm very new to the California real estate, market. But, one thing I do see is the demand for housing. I know that's prevalent in California. Affordable housing is something that's even more, prevalent. There's not a lot of, affordability, with the interest rates being so high. That's really, pricing out a lot of people. But people are still buying. People are still buying renovated properties that are, really done up well, are selling. So I think, one of the things I have noticed, especially like properties that are like decent condition, lived in, maybe a little bit of upgrades, but still needs, a lot of work. Those properties are sitting, those properties will
Mm,
sit on the market. Um, Whether it's, just because it needs too much work and the price is too high. A lot of people don't want to move in, pay a bunch of money, and then have to do all kinds of work.
yeah.
So it's one of those things. I mean, it's just in the short amount of time that I've been doing wholesale, almost 2 years. I mean, it's up and down. I mean, even like I would say like 3 months ago, the second quarter of the year, I mean, it was really like picking up. Like the market there was a
Mhm.
lot of activity. Like we were doing a lot of deals, and there was a lot of, properties that were going through. And more recently it has ticked down a little. It has, slowed down a little. I don't know if that's, due to the election. We got the election coming up, and that's, I know, I've always heard that all election years is always crazy with real estate, and this is the
Yeah.
first election year that I've experienced. So I don't know if you have another opinion on that, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things it's up and down. And I mean, there's opportunities in every market. I think
Yeah.
every time of the year, I mean, there's opportunities. It's just, you gotta work harder. You gotta look, you gotta
Yes.
look, and you'll find them. They're out there.
Yeah. They're out there. Exactly. I get you. What would you say are some of the legal considerations that somebody should has to take into consideration in that wholesaling industry in California?
Yeah, yeah. So it kind of goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier, with, ethics and kind of the barrier to entry to get into wholesaling, because it is so low. There are some, problems that, come up, unfortunately, just because, you don't necessarily need a real estate license to do wholesaling in California. I do know I do pay attention to regulation and what's going on around the country, in terms of wholesaling, and there are states recently within the past 5 months that have come down with pretty heavy regulation against wholesaling.
Oh.
Yeah, I know South Carolina says you have to be licensed to wholesale, and then once you're licensed, you can't do wholesaling. So they're essentially eliminating wholesaling and marketing properties that you don't own, because that's what essentially wholesaling. You don't own the property. You're essentially you know you have the rights to purchase the property, and that's what's
Mhm.
valuable. Whether you do close on it, and then you do like a double close, which is something that I'm experienced in, is actually closing on the property, and then you know doing a back-to-back closing, so to speak, where you would close within like 1 or 2 days of closing. Another strategy is assignments. So a lot of wholesalers do assignments, which is basically once you're in escrow to purchase a property, you will basically assign your rights to purchase that property through escrow. You'll do some paperwork, and then essentially the buyer on the back end will just replace the wholesaler and take over the transaction, and then there'll be a fee involved to move into the deal. So that is something that I know there's some regulation against, in terms of doing some assignments. I know the seller has to be aware, there has to be some disclosure. I know in like Arizona, to say they require you to put in contracts. If you're going to wholesale, you have to put disclosure that you may wholesale the property. It's something that some investors try to dodge around. They try to not be upfront about. They try to sneak another buyer in, which, if you're playing games like that, I mean, it's not going to work. It's not going to work out for
Come
you.
on. Yeah.
Karma's going to come around, and
Yes.
but it's one of those things that I'm paying attention to, and I'm adapting, because I see around the country there's some regulation, and there's some reform that's happening. So
Mhm.
I'll just try to be on top of what's going on, and as a licensed agent, that's one of the good things I think, is if you are going to wholesale in California, is to get licensed, because
Mhm.
you're under that agency. You have to follow code of conduct, you have to disclose, and it just puts you at a higher standard than someone who doesn't want to take the time to get licensed, which
Yeah.
is which doesn't take very long, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. I do wonder if some of the people that don't get licensed and do wholesaling find it that they can kind of play that line, that fine line, because they don't have those fiduciary responsibilities that we as licensees do.
Yep.
So they get to go, okay, well, I can be unsavory a little bit because I'm not licensed. I'm not in jeopardy of losing my license, and I'm not bound by those same, code of conduct issues. So
Right.
so you kind of mentioned it a little bit there, kind of what a transaction looks like. But tell us, okay, you have a buyer, you're getting them under contract. Excuse me, not a buyer. You have a seller, you have a
Right.
house, you have a seller, you're getting them under contract. How does that process look? Walk us through that, and how do you ensure transparency, like you were just talking about, between you, the buyer, seller, all of the parties in the transaction?
Yeah, so I like to start, up front, before, right when the conversation, initially starts, and as I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm primarily working with real estate agents to
Okay.
get a lot of these opportunities. So the real estate agents that I'm working with, they've already, done a lot of the work in terms of, talking with the seller, working with the seller, for months, sometimes, come to an agreement to get the listing, with the
Mhm.
seller to help them, sell the property. So the agents, they're the ones that, know the sellers. They're the ones that are, their, guide, their counselor sometimes in some situations.
Oh, yeah.
So they're the ones that know the situation and what's going on. So yeah, I mean, up front, I mean, I like to tell agents, I mean, I tell them, look, I mean, we're, investors, we buy properties cash. I do work for a company, so the company I do work for does do some fix and flips as well. So we don't just wholesale properties. We do fix and flips, rentals. So we are, kind of real estate investors. We do
Okay.
multiple different exits, and wholesale is a strategy and an exit strategy on a deal. So I like to be upfront. I like to tell agents, I'll tell them I say, this is a property that, we might take down to flip. It could be a property that we end up, doing like a joint venture or wholesaling it to one of our investors that we work with, because we do have, a very large, network of investors that, do deals with us and love to, take on these opportunities. So, that's a value that we can, provide to, these agents and these sellers, by getting, the properties closed. A lot of the times they're wanting, quick close, cash. I like to kind of under promise over deliver. I don't want to say all these things up front, like, oh, we can close in 3 days and we can offer full price. And
Yeah.
then no, you get to it and then, oh, I need 6 more days, due diligence, and I need 30,000 on the price to come down. It's like, no, like I want to be upfront and be like, just I think being one of the big things that I'm seeing is a lot of wholesalers don't know how to underwrite, how to evaluate deals. And I think that's very important, especially when you're dealing with the front part of the transaction when you're purchasing these properties. I mean, you really want to stick to your guns on the numbers. Like you don't want to offer, you know, way too much if it's not going to work, just to
Mhm.
get it, which, is a terrible idea. And that's what gives wholesale, a bad name, because, unfortunately that happens. And, it's one of those things that, if the number doesn't work the first time, wholesale is all about follow up. It's one of those things
Mhm.
that, if it's a no, one day, 2 weeks later, it might be a yes. 3 weeks later, it might be a yes. So it's just,
Right.
really sticking to your numbers and having faith that, you ran your numbers correctly, and just staying strong to them. Like, don't let anything, oh, maybe I can, offer this just to get it, and then we can get down to the number I really need it at. I'm like, no, don't, that's not a good idea. A lot of it is
Yeah.
follow up. And I mean, I've gotten deals being the third in line after two other people fell out of escrow because of
Nice.
some of those same things that I just explained, locking it
Yeah.
up high, and then I came in and was able to, you know, be the solution and close the deal. And hopefully the seller at the end of the day had a better feeling of investors, maybe after we were able to close it. I know they started off a little rocky with investors, but I think, at the end of the day we were able to provide a solution and get the job done. So that's what everybody's looking for at the end of the day.
Yeah. So once you have them under contract, you have a house, what happens next? You just pick up the phone and start dialing everybody in your database, or?
Yeah, so we get a property. I get a property under contract. We have a transaction coordinator that helps out. So we, get the contract, all the addendums, everything. sent to escrow. So we start the escrow process. We make sure that title is clear, title is being pulled. So we want to make sure, that there's no liens on the property, that there's nothing that's gonna, inhibit us from closing. But yes, once our due diligence period starts, which is something we usually bake into the agreement, is those due diligence days, to inspect the property, to walk the property, to reach out to our investors, to see if anyone's interested in buying the property. So yes, as soon as we start that due diligence period, that's when the clock starts. That's when it's time to pick up the phones and reach out to your investor clients that you've worked with before. I think it's a great opportunity to find new investors. I think that's one of the strategies that has worked for me amazing in the past. I had a deal this spring in South Los Angeles, and it was one that I actually was working on the purchase. So I was purchasing the property. I found the agent. She brought me the deal, and we got that under contract. And the first thing that I did was look in the neighborhood that the house that I was buying in, and I was looking for, flippers. I was looking for properties that are renovated, basically the comparables. I was looking at the comparables to my own property, and I ended up finding the buyer that flipped 1-2 streets over, and he ended up buying this property for me. He bought it blind. He didn't even go see it. So
nice. Well
that
done.
doesn't happen every time.
Yeah. Right.
The numbers
are not typical. No?
Yeah. The numbers were just amazing, and it was a win-win-win for everybody. It was great. I really enjoy working when I do get to interact with the seller. It's not all the time, because some of the times, the properties are vacant, or it's a probate or something, but sometimes, the sellers are actually living in the properties that we're buying. And that's one of the things that, I really, really do enjoy, is just interacting and just talking with them and helping them out. I had a seller once that was, I went over, and she was still moving, boxes. It was like at 9:30 at night. I had to go to the property the day before we closed just to take pictures, and she was still there, and I was able to help her out and move the rest of her stuff to her car. And it was just doing small stuff like that is what's really what's really enjoyable, is just seeing that you're able to help people out in the community. And that's something that really stands strong.
Yeah, I love that. Now, can any buyer, like, hey, I'm Joe Buyer, I'm a first-time home buyer, I have, down payment assistant program, and I want to buy a house from a wholesaler because it's a discount. Mm-hmm. Can I be a investor to buy a house from wholesaler? Can it be any buyer out there, or what is that criteria look like to be a buyer?
Yeah, no, great question. So typically, the buyers that we work with are investors. So typically they're, they either have cash or they have a hard money loan. One of the things with these types of transactions is they're usually very quick. Okay. That's one of the advantages for the seller. Do they want speed and convenience, or do they want price? Usually in these types of situations, the sellers want speed and convenience. So we need someone, that we sell it to be able to be, to offer that as well. We especially if it's a short escrow, like a 5-day close, we're not going to want to assign that to a conventional buyer who's going to have to, go through all of these processes,
inspections and appraisals and loan pre-approvals and all of that fun stuff.
Right. And especially for like an assignment, because the buyer that you would be assigning it to, the buyer has to basically, they would be taking over the existing terms. So they would be taking over like the cash purchase, quick close. But, for wholesalers like us that do, the double close, we're able to close on the property on the front end, and then we're able to sell to conventional buyers. We've sold a handful of properties to conventional buyers. Once we've closed on it, we've been able to work with conventional buyers to allow them to purchase the property. It's usually at a higher price, which is great for us. So we're able to kind of allow them to go through their process in terms of loans and appraisals and all of that. But I'd say typical on the typical transaction that I'm seeing, it's mainly fix and flip investors, buy and hold investors. There are hedge funds, not as much now that I'm seeing as in the past, but there are larger funds that purchase these types of properties. But I mean, usually the properties too are in condition for investors. So usually, like, first time home buyers, they're not going to want to purchase a property with a hole in the roof and you know
Yeah.
mold and all kinds of stuff. So usually it's best fit for an investor. But there's opportunities that we get properties that are in good shape, but the motivation for the seller is they still have to sell. They still have to sell quick, and because there's something else going on. It's not just the property's in distress, but they're in distress. So we do get properties that are in very good condition that can qualify for FHA, or
Okay, I didn't know that.
that we can offer that on the back end as well. Yeah.
Okay, that's news to me. Good
Yeah.
to know. So I know you've been in the industry, like I said, maybe 2 years or, floating
Yeah.
around that. But what advice would you give? I've actually referred people who said, hey, I want to get into investing in real estate, but I actually have $0, 0 cents. How do I get in? And I say, go join a wholesaling team and start there. So that's been my advice for people who want to flip, but want to partner with somebody and they kind of don't know where to start. What would you say would be a good candidate for somebody who says, hey, I want to get into wholesaling, but is it for me?
Yeah, I think, it's not for everyone, because it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of consistency. It takes a lot of action. I mean, there's days that, you're calling all day, you're reaching out, no after no after no after no after, get off the phone. I don't want to talk to you, getting, cursed out, all kinds of stuff. It can be brutal. So
Yeah,
you gotta be tough. You gotta be able to take it on the chin, and on to the next one, on to the next one. So it does take, a type of person to, do that. Not everyone is going to want to, make those calls, because a lot of it is, outreach. You got to be consistent in the outreach, because not every opportunity is going to be a yes. You're going to get more no's than yeses, and that's a fact. So you just got to be, resilient. The good thing about it, though, like you said, it can be a great option for new people that are just getting into real estate, like myself. I had no prior experience. I worked for a mortgage lender for 11 months, but it was just like a phone, 9 to 5 type job. But before I started doing, I never had a sales job, never had real estate job, anything like that. It was just, you just gotta, you can step into this type of, position. And if you're just motivated and want to put in the work, then, you can do really well. You can help a lot of people out. And I think, if you have that mindset too, of more than just, hunting for deals, it's more, how many people can I help, today?
yeah,
How many sellers can I help out of a bad problem? How many investors can I provide a solution to them by bringing, an opportunity to, and wholesaling is, a great way to get into this industry, because it's a great way to, earn some money. You can earn some, pretty significant money if you're, consistent, and if you do things the right way and put in the work. Some of these deals can be, pretty big. And especially for, someone that's starting off that, maybe doesn't have a lot of money, I think, doing like what I'm doing, like direct to agents, I mean, that's the only cost you need is a cell phone and your
And a
car.
drive to make the calls, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Drive. Yeah. A drive to make the calls. And sometimes you actually have to get in your car and drive to properties, but that's a lot of fun. So yeah, I mean, it's great. It's a great opportunity for new people, whether they're younger, whether they're older, just anyone that wants to get into the industry, because you learn so much. You learn so much about contracts, motivation. You learn a lot about, if you're doing the investor side of, wholesaling, you learn so much about, projects and fix and flips. And I mean, that's why I eventually want to kind of evolve into more than just, a wholesaler, and, kind of branch out and do some projects, own some rentals and build a portfolio. And I think wholesale is a great, foundation, because at the end of the day, you want to be someone who transacts. You always want to be transacting real estate. And
Yeah.
Wholesale is a great strategy to transact, and to transact fairly quickly as well. So it's a great opportunity.
Now, you've seen a lot of houses. What's some of the craziest things that maybe you've seen in a property that you walked through? He's
Boy,
like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of the properties are obviously very dirty. I mean, I was in one in Culver City, actually, just when was that, Tuesday, and I have a pretty strong smell. Like my nose, like I grew up on a farm, with farm animals and manure and all that.
yeah.
And this house, I walked in and I couldn't be in there. It was, I don't know what it was.
Like,
I
I didn't
don't
want to
know,
find out.
but it was bad.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
bad. But I mean, the house is great. It's a good opportunity. I'm actually trying to sell that one to investors.
Smell
So
it all.
no, I did warn him before he went. I'm like, it does smell really bad, but I think the one that really stands out, there's a house in Silver Lake. It was one of the first houses that I ever saw when I first started, and it was a beautiful house, beautiful mid-century in Silver Lake, Los Angeles. It was a mid-century, which is so desirable for that area. It's insane.
Mhm.
Overlooked the lake, a beautiful home, but the seller, he was a contractor, but also a hoarder. So when you think of hoarder, some of these hoarder houses, you see a lot of like trash or just knickknacks. And but no,
Mhm.
this house, it was like materials. It was like metal pipes and tools, and like it was insane. Like the whole garage and the whole house was just full of tools and metal and wood, and it was crazy. I'd never seen anything like it. Like it was nuts. Like I don't know how. I mean, the demo alone, I can imagine what that would cost to demo and just trash out that property, because it was bad. And there were remnants of animals, and you had to watch your step. you know Big steps. But yeah, it's crazy. You definitely do see you do because you're on the streets, you're out there in the wild. You're going to some unsavory properties. But that's a part of it. I mean, that's one of the things that I love, is to see that property in that state, and then see it 6-9 months later when it's beautiful.
I
And
love that part.
yes,
Yes.
that's one of my favorite parts, is just to see the transformations, and just the value it brings in the neighborhoods, and just the community. Just everybody just loves it when you're able to provide that value and get the
Yes.
houses, turned around.
I love that part when neighbors are walking by and they're like, "Thank you so much for fixing this house." Oh, I love it. You're like, "Thank you. I'm bringing a service." Yes, I love that part. Yeah, absolutely. Josh, is there anything that I left out that you want to add to this conversation? We went over a lot, but I know there's holes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we covered a lot. I really appreciate you having me on here and having someone that's doing wholesale. I know, like you said in the beginning, it can be kind of a taboo, subject for, people within the real estate, industry. So I'm glad that had me on here, and hopefully I provided some more, insight, to your listeners, and hopefully, there's somebody out there that, is on the fence of, wanting to get into the game. And I would just tell them that, just take action, just talk to people. That's what it's all about, is just talking to more people, taking action, and don't be afraid to fail, because that, happens. I've failed, more times than than I can count, but it's not about the failures. It's more, just what you learn, in the process, and just, moving forward and just figuring it out. That's one of the things that's great about real estate is there's so much opportunity to collaborate and work with other people and just move the needle forward. So definitely.
I love it. Yeah. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. I love working with you. Now I can see even more why after getting to know you a bit more in this light. I feel like we share the same way that we want to go about, helping people in the industry, and I love that. I see that's why I gravitate to working with you and having our team work with you. So thanks for bringing that to the table. I appreciate you being willing to come on Your Real Talk and give your insight and your perspective on wholesaling, what it is, what it brings to the market, how it helps buyers and sellers, and all those looking to invest in real estate. So I really appreciate everything that you've contributed for our audience today. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Your Real Talk. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss the latest and the greatest. Until next time.
Thank you, Luna.
Thank you.